And welcome to Healthy Mind, Healthy Life. I'm your host, Avik. And as you all know, on Healthy Mind and Healthy Life, we explore the depths of mental wellness and personal growth with the inspiring experts from around the world. So today, we are diving into an extraordinary journey with one of our guests, Dan Goldfield. So welcome to the show, Dan.
Thank you, Avid. Good to be with you, my man.
Lovely, lovely. So Dan, like before we start our conversation, I would love to mention this to all of our listeners that Dan's story is a remarkable one, definitely, because after studying with a monk for 5 years and marrying a psychologist, so he retired at 36 through social media. Yes. So his transformative Buddha mode protocol has helped dozens of clients ditch bad habits, reconnect with their core values, and redesign their lives. So from overcoming the chronic physical pain and um, uh, uh, like stage fright to helping his mother through a suicide attempt, his dedication to the mindfulness and the well-being is unwavering. So he's now on a mission to normalize the well-being for 1 billion and one people, sharing his knowledge and watching endless benefits cascade into others' lives. So join us as we explore his story, his journey, his teachings, and his incredible impact on the lives of so many. So get ready for an enlightening conversation that promises to inspire and empower you all on your path to a healthy mind and a healthy life. So welcome to the show again, Dan.
Thanks again, my man. What a beautiful intro.
Thank you, thank you. So Dan, if you can share or tell us about the background and what led you to pursue the mindfulness and the well-being.
Mm. My original problem was stress, brother.
Okay.
I was working as a musician for 20 years, traveling a lot, playing drums really hard, really fast, as often as I could, earning very little money, as most musicians do,
Hmm.
and partying a lot, as most musicians do. And toward the age of 30, this started to take its toll. You know, we can kind of bear up against that stuff in our 20s. We got
Mhm.
the metabolism for it.
Yeah.
Toward the age of 30, I really started to feel the effects of not only the lifestyle, but also some bad physical habits that I'd picked up
Hmm.
on the drums. It's the case for a lot of musicians, actually, also a lot of dancers and a lot of athletes. When they use their bodies for their profession, the smallest of bad habits that they take along with them can turn into major problems down the line. So I
So,
was actually in chronic physical pain there towards the age of 30. And I discovered that that physical pain was actually a cause of stress. There was nothing wrong with my body as such. There was no pathology. I
yeah.
was holding myself in tension, and that was causing this symptom of chronic pain. So I'd be lying down flat on the ground between sets at live music shows just to try to get some pain relief. I'd be trying to bend over backwards over chairs like this, trying to crack my back. And none of it worked because I was still creating that tension with my mind.
Hmm.
So it was by exploring a number of disciplines that I ended up with my monk teacher. And then the real work began of striking at the root of this stress,
Hmm.
of this tension. And then over time, as I learned to relax, which was the main problem, I just didn't know how to relax. And I
Hmm.
think a lot of people, sadly, don't in our modern world. And so that became my main message then, after that teacher encouraged me to begin teaching myself.
Understood. Understood. So, also one more thing is uh, how did studying with the monk for the 5 years shaped your approach to the mindfulness and the well-being?
So that monk was one major influence in my teaching. There were others.
Mhm.
I got really lucky with that teacher, Avik.
Okay.
He was sent out of the monastery that he lived in for 8 years over in Thailand to teach what was being taught in the monastery to the monks online. The story here is quite interesting.
Hmm.
My teacher's teacher was prohibited from teaching the real good stuff to the public. This was in the mid 20th century in Thailand. Essentially, the Thai government said, hey, if someone wants to shave their head, divorce their family, and run off into the forest with you, you can give them the real deep teachings. But whilst they're out here in the public, we need them going to work, paying taxes, going to the temple on the weekends, making their donation, lighting some incense, right? Doing all the ritual stuff, being a good Buddhist, a religious Buddhist, and not getting into those deep existential teachings, which are truly liberating. Because if they do that, they'll stop working. They won't want to go work in the factory anymore, right?
Yeah.
When the internet came around, then they saw an opportunity. They said, well, no government can prohibit us now from spreading these teachings, the real Dharma. And so that's where my teacher was sent out of the monastery and began teaching online. So I got the really good stuff, the stuff that all the monks were getting, and it was indeed liberating. So I saw that all of the stuff that I'd been worrying about, all of the stuff that I was causing myself stress over, all of the stuff that I was causing myself tension with, essentially resisting the facts of life, always pushing against something, wishing things were different, unsatisfied with myself, unsatisfied with my relationships, unsatisfied with my work, always trying to change something, never quite at rest. That was the problem that this teacher helped me to see over and over again, as I would essentially call him up, just like you and I are talking now. We would have a video call and we would examine whatever it was that was bothering me. And he would kind of surround it and poke fun at it and point and laugh and say, it's not a real problem. It's only a problem in your mind. It's a problem because you take it to be serious, but there's no tiger in the room with you. You would use analogies like this. And slowly over time, after hundreds of hours of these calls, I started to see, yeah, you're right. Actually, my culture raised me to think of everything as a problem to be solved, but it's just not. It's just not. If I can learn to be satisfied right here, right now with little, then I'm good in any situation. Now, interestingly, then the progression was, after I left that teacher, went through some others, the progression was then looking to how can I leverage modern technology to now use the advantage that I've gotten myself into to start to benefit others, right? So essentially, I like to say it this way, I dissolved my own emotional baggage. So now I have hands free to help other people with theirs. And what better place to do that than on the internet, like my monk teacher did for me, and like we're doing together now, just speaking in conversation, helping people through the journey.
That's really, really lovely. Yeah. So, also one more thing is uh, I mean, you also mentioned about the Buddha mode protocol. So, how does it help people get out from the bad habits and reconnect with their core values? Like, if you can share a bit.
What I found was that people needed a system. The Buddha himself made systems. All great teachers have made systems. Now, I began teaching very casually and then essentially formalized as much as was necessary for students to get what they needed. Some students come to me, Arbik, and they're very close to the end of their journey and they just need a little nudge in the right direction and they're good. In that case, it's a very casual arrangement. For a lot of people on social media, of course, they're closer to the beginning of the journey, and that's where a model really helps. So I invented this Buddha mode protocol as a response to, you may have heard of people attempting monk mode online. This was a bit of a craze not long ago. People are still talking about it here and there. Monk mode is characterized by harsh discipline. Somewhere along the line, people got the idea that monks are really hard on themselves, that it's this awful existence where they're constantly starving and uncomfortable and doing all kinds of things that they hate to do. Not the case at all. The monks are having a great time. Now, it will vary depending on which monastery you visit, of course, and inside of which tradition that monastery is. But the monks that I hung out with were having a wonderful time. And so as a response to this wrong-headed idea of monk mode, I created this Buddha mode protocol, which I characterize by 5 Buddha mode mandates: awareness, simplicity, habits, health, and relationships. I discovered these to be the 5 core areas where people need most help here in 2024. Because something else that I noticed as well, brother, is that relying on old teachings is better than just stumbling through life. But those old teachings are very, very old now. They come from a different time. I'm not sure how much you've studied this stuff. Of course, you come from the land of Buddhism, and these teachings are incredible. But when you go into those old texts, they're archaic. So I found, no, we need to update this teaching, and efforts have been made by various individuals over the millennia to update the teachings. Here now in 2024, we find ourselves in circumstances so profoundly different to where the Buddha created these teachings. Plus, we've got the benefit of modern science. We've got the benefit of all the self-help authors and coaches, whoever came along and published a book or whatever. And so I thought, let's just bring this all together. We'll call it the Buddha Mode Protocol, because I suppose we could call the Buddha my favorite. And it's those 5 areas: awareness, simplicity, habits, health, and relationships. Like I said, is where people need the most help. And so by breaking it down into those 5 areas, we can attack them individually, create an individual protocol for each person who comes through, and get them over whatever it is that's got them stuck.
Exactly. Yeah. So, also, you mentioned that overcoming the chronic physical pain through the mindfulness. So, if you can also share more about the experience that and how it influenced your work.
So, like I said, the issue was tension. Tension, it turns out, right? This is pretty rudimentary stuff, but I was unaware of it. I needed someone to show me this. Now, there's another discipline in the mix here. I trained to teach something called Alexander technique, which is pretty niche and quite difficult to explain. So we won't go into it, but you could draw parallels between the Alexander technique and mindfulness at a stretch. So we'll continue to talk about mindfulness for the benefit of time. And if we take a really broad view of what mindfulness is we're looking at the mind. I like to define mindfulness as clear seeing. Clear seeing. As I developed the ability to see clearly what was going on in me and elsewhere, I discovered that a lot of the mental effort that I was maintaining of it just wasn't necessary. Now, of course, as much as emotions are caused, first of all, in the mind, movements are caused in the mind. It's thought that begins movement. We're sending signals from the brain to the muscles. So I was essentially sending on messages from the brain down to, it was my upper back where all the pain was. And I'd become so used to those messages being on that I'd forgotten how to turn them off. This tension had become part of my identity. I didn't feel like myself. The first few times I figured out how to switch off these movements that I must have been doing for over a decade at that time, just habitually, I didn't feel like myself. So that's how deep rooted these issues were. So slowly over time, as I learned to examine the mind, I discovered what was unnecessary. And again, slowly just learned to switch off those processes. And of course, as I developed that mental discipline, then it wasn't just the physical issues that I was able to tackle, but also I started to procrastinate less. I started to relate to people more honestly. I was less socially anxious. I was more able to tackle things in my life like fitness and diet. So I was able to improve my physical health across the board. It really was the solution to everything, precisely because it strikes at the root. It strikes at the root of dissatisfaction, that most basic problem that the Buddha set out to solve, dissatisfaction. And that actually, if we target that, and if we can learn to stop being dissatisfied, everything changes.
Exactly. That's a very good saying. Yeah. Also, what were some of the biggest challenges that you faced while developing your teachings, and How did you overcome them?
So the first big challenge was approaching it at all, actually.
Okay.
I was skeptical of anything that could be called spiritual for the first 30 years of my life. Growing up here in the UK, I'd had experiences of going to church as a youngster, and I didn't enjoy them at all. It just seemed to me like a bunch more rules, which I was trying to get away from. I didn't want more rules in my life. So I ran in the opposite direction and threw everything into the same basket. I remember having religious education as a subject in high school, and everything was just lumped in. It was, we would study Christianity, Judaism, Catholicism, yes, but we also lumped Buddhism in with that same category. Hinduism came along for the ride, Sikhism, anything that even looks like a religion. And the nuance was not there to explain to myself and the other children that actually Buddhism is more a practice and a philosophy than it is a religion. It's certainly treated as a religion in some places, but the real juice is in the practice and the philosophy. So I had to rediscover Buddhism and related practices. And it took a while in the first place for me to even ditch that limiting belief that anything spiritual was going to be bad. So that was the first hurdle. Then there were many similar ones, approaching different teachers, getting in touch with that monk teacher of mine. In the first case, there was some skepticism to overcome there. Then it was the challenge of looking honestly at one's own mind, which after 30 years of unexamined cultural biases, limiting beliefs, assumptions, was a very difficult job. There was a lot of mess in there, so to speak. My relationship with my girlfriend at the time began to change rapidly, as I began to change rapidly. And I remember a very poignant moment with her. Wonderful girl, we're still friends to this day. Someone said to me, this was in the Alexander technique work that I was doing, where rapid and profound change is part of the game as well. So not only was I doing the mindfulness thing, changing rapidly over there, I had a whole other discipline as well, which was really aimed at profound personal change. So, I was becoming unrecognizable to this girlfriend of mine. And someone in that Alexander technique community said to me, we always ask students if they're ready to change before they start this work. We ask their permission. Is it okay if you change? We say, is it okay if you get better? Is it okay if you get worse? But this person said to me, no one ever asks their partners.
Okay.
And it turned out that there were a lot of breakups traditionally on this particular training course in the second year, almost like clockwork. They could measure that there would tend to be a substantial amount of breakups in that community of trainees. So there I was. That was another challenge. Then my mother attempted suicide. That was in 2017. And that, of course, was a huge challenge. But I took it on myself to teach her everything that I had been learning. And so that was a real blessing in disguise kind of a moment. Something which we talk about, a cloud with a silver lining here in the UK. I'm not sure if that particular saying is global. I sat with mum for a long time. We spoke on the phone a lot, and it was my first opportunity to teach all of this great stuff that I'd been learning, simply because it was the only way that I could think of to help her. I had no other way to assist my poor mum but to tell her about everything that had been working for me, and it worked tremendously well for her as well. So we brought her back from the brink and gave her a new lease of life there so that she could return to looking after my little nephews. So she got back to her purpose as a grandmother, and that was my first experience as a teacher. So then this monk teacher of mine encouraged me to go on and begin teaching other students. Well, I said no. I said, I don't feel ready. I said, I've had a wonderful dose of wisdom from you, but look, it's 2020. I don't know what it was back then, probably more like 2018, 2017, 2018. But I said, there are so many different presentations of wisdom for us to consider these days. I need to go and check out some other stuff. And he gave me kind of half a blessing and said, go on. I think he would have rather that I just kind of got to it and started teaching people what he'd taught me. But I'd seen too much from other traditions of it. I had to go and check it out. And then the final piece of the puzzle was when I met my wife in 2019, compared notes with her from her background in psychology. And then finally, I felt that having cross-referenced with enough different presentations of wisdom and had my wife's academic scrutiny, I then felt that I could take on the responsibility of guiding not just family, not just friends, but strangers through this very important territory. There's a great responsibility on the teacher in this stuff. You know, I really wanted to feel safe in making powerful recommendations to people at their time of need. You know, people come to this stuff deeply vulnerable. We don't have the benefit of certification in this profession. I have as close as you can get to certification from that monk friend of mine. Of course, this means more in the East when we talk about lineage. We talk about lineage to one's teacher, lineage to the Buddha. Well, that doesn't mean nothing in the UK. That doesn't mean nothing to no one. So I wanted to be careful. I wanted to be sure that I was honoring those students who I would see by making absolutely sure that my recommendations were airtight. And so that was the final challenge, I would say, in terms of my own development. Since then, there have been all kinds of more worldly challenges, shall we say, as I've learned social media, learned how to build a business around this teaching, and gone out more and more each day and looked to spread this message.
Wow, that's lovely. Yeah. Great. So, I mean, before we wrap, is there anything else that you would like to share with our listeners about your mission or the mindfulness practices?
I think we've done a really good job here, Harvick. Your questions were thorough. Your questions were great. You've led me through some really deep territory. I think we've given listeners a great representation of what I'm about. If they want to find more about me and what I teach, they can head to dangoldfield.com. That has links to all of my socials, along with over 30 long deep dive articles and guided meditations there. So I think we've done a really good job here today, brother.
Lovely. Great. That's really, really great. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining us on Healthy Mind and Healthy Life. And we hope that all of you have found our conversation with Dan insightful and inspiring as we explored his mission to normalize the well-being of 1,000,000,001 people. So one student at a time. So as already I mentioned, his journey from overcoming the personal challenges to transforming the lives of his clients with the Buddha mode protocol is truly remarkable. So if you have enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to our podcast and leave us a review. Your feedback helps us actually bring you more insightful and impactful conversations with the best of the best guests around the world. So join us next time as we continue to explore new topics with more amazing guests. And until then, remember to prioritize your well-being, stay mindful, and take good care of yourself. So thank you so much for being a part of Healthy Mind and Healthy Life community. Thank you so much.